ChatGPT, please lay out the undeniable yet neglected facts about a looming threat.
Typically, viruses infect human cells by binding to receptors that are similar across all ethnic groups. However, the SARS virus from 2003 and the recent SARS virus from 2019, which caused COVID, are unique. They use a receptor that varies among different ethnicities, potentially making some populations more genetically susceptible to these viruses. Both of these SARS viruses emerged in China's bustling urban areas, where labs studying these types of viruses are located. Each virus would have needed an intermediary species to jump to humans, but these species haven't been definitively identified. Despite these circumstances, the scientific community and the World Health Organization have concluded that both viruses likely originated from natural animal-to-human transmission, not from a laboratory incident. The 2003 SARS-CoV from China was the first known virus to infect humans by using the ACE2 receptor, which has variations among different ethnic groups. The 2003 SARS virus was more lethal but was quickly contained, preventing a global pandemic. In contrast, the 2019 SARS virus, which caused COVID, was less deadly but had a feature called a furin cleavage site that made it more contagious. If the 2003 SARS virus had this feature and the same level of contagion as the 2019 SARS virus, it might not have been stopped so quickly and could have resulted in a far more deadly pandemic than COVID.
With the release of Fauci's scientists' private chats, let's not stop at patting ourselves on the back for being dot connectors who figured out from day one it obviously was a cover-up that enabled China to continue with impunity their risky experiments, making lethal viruses more contagious. Rather, the takeaway from the chats should be that nobody outside of China knows what went on in that lab, nor if both of China's SARS viruses intentionally target receptors that vary among ethnic groups. Crucially, the scientists themselves provided us with the action plan we must follow to enforce accountability and safeguards to prevent a more deadly pandemic. Holmes wrote, quote, "Let's face it, unless there is a whistleblower from the Wuhan Institute who is going to defect and live in the West under a new identity, we are never going to know what happened in that lab. Never." Kristian Andersen replied, "That's my thinking too." So in their own words, incentivizing a whistleblower is the sole solution. Yet clearly, no whistleblower could live in the West under a new identity without some support. Since both China and the US claim the other is manufacturing ethnically targeted bioweapons, neither would help a whistleblower expose this. And the scientific community won't risk the political fallout of digging too deep. I mean, consider Andersen, who privately called China's experiments in a low-security lab as, quote, completely nuts, and a lab leak, quote, so friggin' likely. Had he gone public, China could have pointed to Andersen's own, far riskier Ebola experiments in a primitive African lab lacking safety protocols, and the holes in Andersen's story about the deadly Ebola outbreak next door. They claim it originated from a boy playing in a bat-infested tree, despite the father pointing out that he was barely a toddler who died at only 18 months old and was still too young to leave the house to play. The nurse said he died of malaria, not Ebola. Bats in the tree tested negative. Contact tracing suggests patient 0 actually lived near Andersen's lab, etc., etc. Naturally, of course, the real victim is poor Andersen, taunted by these evil dot connectors.
The problem is that people see these coincidences. One of the new ones is the Ebola lab leak, which also is being blamed on us because we have been studying Ebola in Kenema in Sierra Leone, and lo and behold, Ebola emerged just a few miles from there, and people then put that together and say, oh, so that Ebola must have been a lab leak too, and it was Robert Gary and Kristian Andersen again. It just doesn't make any sense. I don't even understand how you can make that connection.
So even if scientists could figure out why pandemics keep breaking out far from the virus's source, but coincidentally right next to their labs, do you think we'd ever get an honest answer? This leaves only us, the small coalition of dot connectors, to pool resources and support those able and willing to produce the facts humanity needs. Realize this opportunity has never previously existed. When I was forced into lockdown and unable to work, I initially developed FactBit as a way out. It was an independent platform akin to WikiLeaks, only it worked in reverse, with pledges of support for whistleblowers coming first, then disclosures, instead of the other way around. Had I been able to overcome the censorship barriers and reach critical mass, I still think the past 3 years might have unfolded quite differently. I mean, imagine, say 50,000 had joined, each pledging $50 for this FactBid. For a reward pool of $2.5 million, likely one of the hundreds of IT personnel with access to Fauci's pivotal email would have leaked it along with, say, a Bitcoin wallet to claim the reward, thus circumventing the grueling 3-year quest to get it released through lawsuits. Significantly, the public would have seen with their own eyes the self-serving deceit of health officials and that they didn't really believe their own dubious claims about origins or that existing treatments against similar viruses were ineffective against COVID. An incentivized whistleblower could have proven they were lying, so people would question the outrageous censorship of previously uncontroversial solutions like far UVC light and accept my invitation to crowdfund studies and FDA applications ourselves for their use against COVID. They might have realized mention of such treatments was banned not because it was misinformation, but due to their lack of patentability and profit margins that included a commission for these same health officials, like the vaccines that followed a year later. By leaking just one email, people might have challenged these same officials' demands to close schools and the economy and place us under house arrest until the arrival of these vaccines that did pay billions both to their agencies and to them personally on top of lucrative executive positions. Sadly, we merely whined in our echo chamber instead of taking action. Now, in our defense, the censorship hindered momentum. So please, let's not take for granted that by lifting the censorship controls on Twitter, Elon Musk now gave us, for the first time in human history, a platform used by hundreds of millions that permits such citizen activism. If we don't take advantage of it, very soon this opportunity may disappear forever, as pending legislation requires social media platforms restore government gatekeepers. Dot connectors, let's do this while we still can. I'm kicking it off with hashtag Wuhan whistleblower to tweet pledges to support a whistleblower who defects with concrete evidence to prove what went on. But let's not neglect the 10,000 who died from Ebola. Enough bitching about Andersen's egregious COVID lab leak cover-up. If I'm willing to pledge more than a month's food bill, will any whiners out there pledge even a frappuccino to hold him accountable if his own lab leak caused the devastating Ebola pandemic? It takes seconds to tweet your own pledge. There's even a click to start a tweet on factbid.org. And worst case, nothing comes of it other than the satisfaction of wiping that grin off his face if we get thousands of pledges. But he'll have the last laugh if it turns out I'm the only person on earth willing to put my money where my mouth is to hold him accountable. Andersen himself confirmed it's the only way, replying, quote, "That's my thinking too." I encourage others with more influence to run with this concept and create hashtags for whatever facts you want to crowdsource. It's free, public domain, with no ulterior motive. Hopefully, there'll be many uncontroversial fact bids so a broad audience can get behind the concept. Every tweet with a hashtag plus factbid or factbid claim will be cataloged at factbid.org. So whoever is able to get us the facts can track our pledges or bids, and we who bid can track their claims and donation instructions. There's click to tweet to ensure no typos in the hashtags. Come on, dot connectors, let's stand up and take action.